All right, let's talk about a really crucial moment in any audit. It's that point where an auditor has done their homework, they've looked at the company, and they've spotted potential trouble. It's one thing to find a risk, right? But knowing exactly what to do next, that's a whole different ballgame.
So just imagine this for a second. You're the auditor, and you've just uncovered a major risk in a company's finances, something that could be a material misstatement. What's your next move? Do you just start digging everywhere, hoping you'll find something? Or is there a professional, systematic way to handle this?
Well, that's exactly where ISA 330 comes into play. You can think of this standard as the official playbook for that exact moment. It tells an auditor precisely how to respond to those risks they found. It's all about having a method, not just reacting to madness.
So first up, let's really nail down what the auditor's mission is here. Because ISA 330 frames this whole thing as a kind of investigation, and every good investigation has one core objective.
And here it is. The big mission is to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Now, what does that actually mean? In plain English, it means the auditor needs to gather enough, high-quality, convincing proof to feel confident about their final opinion on the financial statements. Their job is to turn a suspicion into a conclusion, one way or the other.
Now, to pull off this mission, auditors don't just have one trick up their sleeve. Nope, they use a two-level strategy to tackle these risks, starting with the big picture and then zooming all the way down to the nitty-gritty details. And this slide lays out that game plan perfectly. On the left, you've got the overall responses. These are the high-level strategic moves. Think of it like a coach changing the team's formation. The auditor might bring in more senior staff, or maybe they'll throw in some unpredictable tests just to keep everyone on their toes. Then, on the right, you have the assertion-level responses. Now, assertions are just the claims that management is making. That sales are real, that assets actually exist. And these responses are the boots-on-the-ground work of testing those very specific claims. Okay, so let's pop open the auditor's toolkit and look at the first major tool they use. This one is all about testing the company's own internal defense systems.
Now, the really important thing to get here is that a test of controls isn't about finding the mistake itself. It's about checking the company's own safety nets. Are the procedures they've set up to prevent or catch errors actually working like they're supposed to? It's kind of like a detective checking to see if a building's security cameras are actually on and recording properly.
So, do auditors have to do this every time? Not always, but there are two key situations where it is absolutely required. First, if the auditor's whole plan is based on the idea that those controls are working, well, you can't just assume a safety net will catch you if you haven't actually tested it. And second, sometimes, especially with really complex automated systems, just looking at the final numbers isn't enough. Testing the controls behind the scenes is the only way to get the evidence you need. This brings up a super practical question that auditors deal with all the time. To be efficient, can they just rely on the work they did on a control in last year's audit? And the answer is yes, but with some very strict rules attached. If a control hasn't changed, an auditor can lean on prior evidence. But first, they have to confirm that no significant changes have been made. Then, the standard says they absolutely must retest that control at least once every 3 years. And finally, they've got to rotate which controls they test so they're not just checking the same things over and over again. Okay, that was tool number one. Let's move on to the second major tool in the auditor's kit. This is where they really roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty verifying the numbers directly. This is the direct approach. A substantive procedure is designed specifically to hunt for and find those material misstatements. So, if testing controls was like checking the security system, this is like going room by room, opening the books, and looking for direct evidence of a problem. And there is one golden rule here that you just can't forget. The standard makes it crystal clear. No matter how low the risks seem, auditors must perform substantive procedures for every single material part of the financials. There is no skipping this step. It doesn't matter how great you think the company's controls are. Now, these procedures come in two main flavors. On the left, you've got tests of details. This is what most people think of as classic audit work, verifying individual transactions, confirming bank balances, that sort of thing. Then on the right, you have substantive analytical procedures. This is more like being a data detective, looking for trends, patterns, and weird relationships in the financial data that just don't seem to add up. All right, so the auditor has used their tools, they've collected their evidence. The mission now enters its final and perhaps most critical phase, evaluating everything they've found and creating that official record of their work.
This quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of what it means to have auditor integrity.
See, their job isn't to prove the company is right. Their job is to find the truth. And that means looking at all the evidence, especially the evidence that contradicts what they were expecting or hoping to find.
But what happens when the trail goes cold? I mean, what if, after all this work, an auditor simply cannot gather enough evidence to be sure about a particular area? What's the protocol then?
The standard lays out a very clear path. First, you have to try again. The auditor must attempt to get more evidence. But if that's just impossible, the consequences are serious. They cannot give a clean audit report. They have to either issue a qualified opinion, which basically puts a big red flag on that specific problem, or a disclaimer of opinion, which tells the world, hey, we just couldn't get enough info to form a conclusion at all. And finally, every single step of this entire mission has to be meticulously documented. The auditor's work papers become their official case file. And that file has to clearly show their overall strategy, it has to create a direct link between each risk they found and the specific thing they did to address it, and of course it has to record what they found as a result.
So when you step back and look at it, ISA 330 provides an essential, detailed map for how to respond to risk. But at the end of the day, it's the auditor's professional judgment that actually decides the final destination. And that really leaves us with the ultimate question that every auditor has to answer on every single engagement. How do you really know when you've done enough?